Hi, I'm Rabbi Orlofsky. Welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Thank you for that overwhelming expression. It would make a lesser person perhaps feel a little insecure, but I get so many emails from people constantly now who are telling me how much this podcast means to them, how it is giving them the chizuk. I got so many beautiful, I don't even know which one to pick. I should really read them out one time, but just the person was telling me about all the hard times she was going through and all the difficulties, and how this podcast, the way she put it, reestablished her relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Gosh, who could ask for more than that? I probably told this story already. I don't remember what I say anymore, but when Rishach started Degel Torah, broke off from Agudas Yisrael. Agudas Yisrael represented all of Haredi Jewry for the most part. Yeah, and so nobody can represent everybody. But he broke off to make Degel Torah, and Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach didn't go along with him. So when the Yeted Ne'eman came out, which was the paper for Degel Torah, they wouldn't call Rosh Shlomo Zalman Maron. They just called him Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rashiv Kol Torah, whatever they called him. This is a story I heard, by the way. I haven't checked any of this out. I don't know if any of it's true, but there's no reason that should stop me from saying it. And someone said to him, some of his Talmidim, says, Rabbi, we have to make a macha. It's covered the Torah. Shlomo Zalman said, covered the Torah. You want to hear covered the Torah? He says, Moshe Feinstein once called me in the middle of the night. He says, I know it's late by you, but I have to paskin a shayla, and it's mamish tzakonis nefashos, and I don't know who else to talk it through with. So Moshe set up the whole shayla. Rosh Shlomo Zalman gave his answer, and Moshe said, oh, that's what I thought, shkoyach. He says that Reb Moshe Feinstein would call me up to ask me my opinion, okay. But that I was mechaven to what he was going to say, he says, that's the greatest covet of all. So all these wonderful letters that I get from people telling me how much chizuk they get from this half-hour time that we spend together, that's more than enough for anybody. Nobody could ask for more than that. So whether you're watching on Torah Anytime or on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts or wherever you watch and listen to your Spotify, Facebook, direct download from the satellite, wherever you have my RabbiOrlofsky.com, wherever you're watching, we're so happy that you're with us and that we get to share this experience together. So we are sponsored this week anonymously. As it happens to be, I know the people. There's an old rabbi joke. In case you haven't met old rabbis, you want to tell them an old rabbi joke. Rabbis are called upon to do funerals. It's part of their job. It's one of the reasons that I was never really a prime candidate for the rabbinate because I'm a Kohen. Now, there are Rabbanim who somehow work around this. I heard, again, just repeating what I heard, that when Shlomo Riskin was rabbi of Lincoln Square, he had a glass box built for himself. And he would, before the Levaya, go into the glass box. And then they would bring in the mace and everybody else, and he would give the hesped from the glass box, So I said to one of the people once, I said, didn't that seem strange? He says, no, he looked just like Eichmann. What a terrible thing to say, which is what we're going to be talking about this week, terrible things to say. But anyway, so sometimes, rabbis called upon to give a funeral, and it could be a parent of somebody. Sometimes they just hire someone. Total tangent. Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg said that one of the things that destroyed Judaism in America was that people didn't feel an obligation to get a rav of their shul to be their spiritual leader. They had, shtibach where they davened, and rabbis would hang up signs outside their house, rabbi or religious ceremonies performed. and you go to a rabbi. So if you had a Levi or something, you just hire a rabbi, come in, so he doesn't know the person. So this rabbi is giving a hesped, and he's talking about the person and the nifter, what a special person he was, and what a light he was, and a whole thing. And he looks at it and goes, "Oh my goodness, I know this guy." So it's sponsored this week anonymously. It's a schus for the donors, and oh my goodness, I know these people. Wonderful people. This is one of those wonderful shidduchim where I knew both sides before they got married, and then they get married, and now I know the one side. Guy was at a wedding. He says, "Are you here from the chassan or from the kala?" He says, "The opposition." Chas v'shalom. These are two wonderful, wonderful people, and this should be a big schus for them, and all good things. So this week is going to be Parshas Vayera. We are moving along in Bereshis already. Time flies whether you're having fun or not. That's what I notice. You just get old, and time tends to go quickly. So Parshas Vayera, we're already well into Bereshis. And there's so much, so action-packed. There's one area that I want to try to focus in on. Sarah finally has a baby at the age of 90, names him Yitzchak. And Avram already has a child from his first marriage. He's 13 years old. His name is Ishmael. And it says he takes Yitzchak out into the field to be mitzachek. Says Rashi, mitzachek, to play, to make fun, to fool around. He brings psukim to show that mitzachek, that word, can mean three things. Avodah Zorah, idol worship. Gilui Arayos, immorality. And shrichas damim, murder. Murder. And Ishmael, the son of Abraham, growing up in the house of Abraham, when three angels come to visit at the beginning of the parasha, he tells Ishmael to hurry and start making preparations. So him and his father Abraham are running around preparing a suda for three angels. And a year later, he's engaging in the three cardinal sins: murder, immorality, and idol worship. Pretty astounding. An astounding concept. It's hard to wrap your head around this. And Rashi continues and says that he and Yitzchak were having an argument about who was going to become the inheritor of Abraham. And Ishmael said, "I'm the oldest son." And Yitzchak didn't really say too much because he was a little kid. Yeah. So he invites Yitzchak out into the field and uses him as target practice and starts shooting arrows at him. Well, Yitzchak's mother, Sarah, is not surprisingly upset about this behavior. Listen, sometimes kids fool around. My daughter goes to a parenting class, and one of the principles they taught her is that when kids are fighting, you don't have to intervene at every juncture. Sometimes you have to let kids work it out for themselves. I'm not arguing the pros and cons of that, but I think everyone would agree, though, that if one of the kids is shooting arrows at the other one, you have to draw the line there, especially if he's got a 13-year advantage on the other one, right? So she goes over to Abraham and she says, "This kid is not going to inherit in place of my son. Send him away." Now, Abraham is very troubled by this. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, listen to your wife. She knows what she's saying. Yeah. A pasuk that I'm sure every wife is happy to hear. Yeah. Rabbi Gopin, who is one of the legends of Jewish education. It's so amazing. We live in a world and we don't understand where everything came from. it's almost a year since the passing of Rabbi Geisman, and I spoke about this in a podcast after he passed away, about there were people who built Klal Yisrael, built Judaism in a time when it looked like there was nothing left, and there were heroes. Gopin was one of those. He was a legend. And the things that he had, not that he's not, the tremendous things that he did. In fact, he listened to the podcast last week, and he heard me quote Soloveitchik about Halo and Yom Ha'atzmaut. He brought me a sefer that he wrote called Davening with the Rav, where he shares his own experiences, and particularly as far as the Rav in Tefillah goes. So when he came to give me his book, first of all, I'm so honored that he listens to the show, but so I told him, I said, I always say over, I was at his daughter's chasana, it was on Parshas Yisro, and he was the Masada Kedushin, and he spoke into the chuppah, and he said to his future son-in-law, because there's a pasuk in this week's parsha that I really think should be your direction for the rest of your life. And Moshe listened to everything his father-in-law said. He said to me, "You're not the only one." He says, "I know somebody else who every Parsha Yisro calls me up to say, every time I come to this Parsha, I think of what you said." So that's a good Parsha for father-in-laws. This is a good Parsha for wives. So Avram's very upset. Now, it seems to me like that Sarah put the emphasis on the wrong point, right? Because I would go to Avram and say, "Listen, I'm going to break this to you, but he's shooting arrows at our son, like he's trying to kill him. Not only that, but he's over the Zohar and Gilead Rayas. So we have reached a certain breaking point here, wherein whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish, we're not succeeding with." She doesn't say that. She says, "Listen, he's claiming that he's going to inherit, and he's not going to inherit over Yitzchak, and so send him away so that his claim, it's clear that he's not going to inherit." Gosh, you're really hiding the main point over here. The main point over here is Avodah Zarah, Gilead Rayas, Shfichas Damim, the three cardinal sins, the worst things you could possibly do. Things that you have to allow yourself to get killed rather than to violate, and he's doing these things, and instead you're talking about who's going to inherit. That's the point. So I'm going to say a chiddush, and it's my own idea. I didn't see it anywhere, but if you've been watching, you know that I'm certainly not afraid to say my own thing. I usually give a share every other Motzi Shabbos in Har Nof. I don't know if I've mentioned this already. Every other Motzi Shabbos, I give a share in Har Nof, and I give a share in Mesilas Yesharim to ladies in Har Nof. They were up to Precious already, if you want to come and join that one. And but I just started a brand new share in Telstone, if you anywhere in the area, and you want to come to my Mesilas Yesharim share, and that's for men and women. So if you're interested, it's in Telstone in the
Pius Center.
In the Pius Center. It's like when you first come in, you make a left. It's right there. So that's 8 o'clock on Tuesdays. Sharp. They like to start on time. Anyway, so
The point of
get it. These are the things that get edited out in case you want to. So I want to say my own chiddush here. And so when I'm preparing my Motzi Shabbos here, there's certain Talmidei Chacham I call up to check out the ideas that I'm saying, because I don't want to come out and say actual kfira if I can avoid it. So there's one person I call up and I say, I offer whatever my chiddush is going to be, and I said, "Can I say that?" He says, You can say anything. Yeah, that's about right. Anyway, he's shooting arrows at him. And you find that this becomes something of a theme when they go off into the desert, and his mother puts him a arrow's length away, the amount to shoot an arrow. That's how far she puts them away. And after they get saved, it says Ishmael grows up and becomes a Rova Keshes. He becomes an archer. You're finding a little arrow theme over here, yeah? What's the idea here? So anytime you find the idea of an arrow, it's always talking about the tongue, the lashon. I'm not sticking my tongue out at you. I'm just showing you for in case you don't understand. Yeah, I so many things I've never gotten over from my youth. One of them is I can't eat tongue. I'm sure it's very tasty. I've never tasted it. I just can't. I just can't taste something that has taste buds. I feel like it's tasting me back. I don't know. That's just me. But in Eretz Yisrael, you can still get real kishka. In America, it's against the law. Real kishka is the intestines. They clean them out, and then they stuff them with filling, and they cook it up, and it's quite a treat. In America, you can't do this anymore because they don't feel like you can really clean out those intestines well enough. Here in Israel, it's good, close enough. But tongue, anyway, whenever you see an arrow, it means a tongue. Okay, the tongue looks like an arrow, but it's more than that too. And that is that you can say something and it goes very far away, like an arrow. That's the chiddush of an arrow. A sword is something that I have to hold in my hand and I can strike you, and there's only so far I can go with a sword. An arrow gives me the advantage of distance. England was able to defeat France in the 100 Years' War. Their secret weapon was the longbow. And in fact, in England, it was forbidden to do any sports other than archery because they wanted to train people in the use of the longbow. So they would have these archers, and these archers could stand at a distance, and as the knights would come in, and these were strong enough that they could pierce armor, and so of course they all come in on their armor, and toom, 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 and they just slice them up. It's a big problem. Anyway, but arrows go very far. You don't know the distance. We all know the famous mashal they give with Lashon Hara, that a guy comes to the Rav and he says, I killed somebody. How do I do tshuva? He says, go find the biggest rock you can in the woods and bring it into the center of town. And he does. He says, what do I do now? He says, bring it back. Another person comes to him and says, I spoke Lashon Hara. What do I do? He says, go into the center of town and take a feather pillow, rip it open, and throw all the feathers in the air. And he comes back to the river and says, what do I do now? He says, collect all the feathers. He says, well, I can't. They've blown all around. He says, that's the problem with Lashon Hara. You say something bad, it goes all over the place. It's like an arrow. It goes distance. Ishmael is a fascinating enemy. We know there are the Daled Malchios, the four major kingdoms that the Jewish people have to battle. They are alluded to in Parshas Lech Lecha. They're alluded to in Parshas Bereshis. They're the four non-kosher animals the Torah specifies. They're the four different materials that went into the giant idol in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Whenever you find these four, the four kingdoms, Bavel, Babylonia, Persia, Media, the Greeks, and the Romans. But at the end of time, says the Zohar Kodesh, when we finally come back to Israel, waiting for us is going to be Ishmael. And he took Eretz Yisrael while we were away because he could only have Eretz Yisrael when Eretz Yisrael was deserted. Why? Because his bris milah was not a complete bris milah, but it was enough for him to get Eretz Yisrael when we weren't there. And when we come back, he wants Eretz Yisrael. He's an insidious enemy. In the Quran, they tell the story of Akedas Yitzchak from this week's parasha. The only thing is, they substitute Ishmael for Yitzchak. Avraham takes Ishmael up the mountain, and he offers him, and in the last minute he saves him. It's much the whole Akedas Yitzchak, the whole binding of Isaac story. Only it's Ishmael instead. Yeah. So they really want to be us, and not only do they want to be us, but his name is Yishmael. God will hear him. When we fight Esav, it's nice, easy conflict. It's one that we understand. Hakol kol Yaakov Yadai v'dei Esav. Our power is in our voice. His power is in his hands. His is physical power. Ours is religious power through our prayer. Ishmael has the same power of prayer that we have. He's able to use his voice. He is, in a sense, our closest enemy, because he's fighting with the same weapons that we have. And that's why the ultimate enemy for any superhero is, of course, the person who has the same powers. For Superman, it's General Zod, because they're both Kryptonians and they both have the same power. For Iron Man, it's some other guy in a giant iron suit who shoot at each other. Yeah. People who have the same abilities as you, they're the worst enemy to have to fight, because you have to beat them on your terms. Captain America and Red Skull, they both had the super soldier serum. Yeah. I'm not sure what happened in the film, but I'm going back to the comic books. I'm going back to the source material. Yeah. So when you have people who have much the same powers as you, Ishmael has the same power of coal. It's more than that. Rashi says by the Akedah that the reason for the Akedah was because Ishmael said, you got your bris milah when you were 8 days old. I did mine when I was 13. What's the source of their argument? I have more mesiras nefesh for HaKadosh Baruch Hu than you do. I'm willing to go through any amount of pain. I'm willing to blow myself up for what I believe in. Are you? There was this one Arab terrorist who said, we're going to win this war because we're willing to die and you're not willing to die for what you believe in anymore. The ultimate battle between Yisrael and Ishmael is mesiras nefesh. That's the power of speech. And so when Sarah says she's shooting arrows at him, I would like to suggest that he wasn't actually shooting arrows, because otherwise that really should have been the lead. Send Ishmael away because he's trying to kill Yitzchak. What he's trying to do is destroy him with his words. And that's why, what was his words? His words were, I'm going to inherit and you're not. Because I'm the Bechor, I'm the firstborn. I have more mesiras nefesh than you. I daven more than you do. I care more than you do. To the point that we needed a Kedas Yitzchak, where we had to offer up Yitzchak to show, no, I have more mesiras nefesh than you do. That's how serious the threat was. His words, what does the Gemara in Erechim say? Lashon hara is keneged, gilei raya, shvichas dam, and avodah zarah. Lashon hara is equal to the 3 cardinal sins. Speaking evil is just as bad as all of those things put together. So maybe when it says mitzachek, and the only thing you find Sarah says is what Ishmael said, maybe it wasn't actually all of these actions, because it's kind of hard to believe that a kid who grew up in Abraham's house and under the tutelage of Abraham and under the eyes of Abraham, that he would be doing these things, and that you could fool Abraham and he wouldn't know about it. That's the battle. The battle comes down in the end to speech. The reason there's been so much emphasis on Shmiras HaLashon, Chavetz Chaim wrote the Sefer, as he says, it's what's stopping Mashiach from coming. It's our words. How can we daven that Mashiach is going to come when our own words betray us? How can we use the power of tefillah when all these bad words are stopping us? And that's all of this was by way of introduction. because that's really what I wanted to talk about this week, is the character assassination that we participate in on a regular basis. Is a scary, scary story. These two girls on the bus, and they're talking loudly. I know that would come as a surprise to you. But they're talking about a friend of theirs who got married, Shani, Khani, Bani, whoever it was, yeah. They're saying, do you believe that Shani got such a great shidduch? I don't know, because, Shani's this and Shani's that. Shani did this and Shani did that. Saying on and on and on and on. And finally, this woman turns around, is sitting in front of them, and said, thank you so much. What do you mean? He says, Shani's engaged to my son. I didn't know anything about her. I'm going home right now and breaking the shidduch. It probably wasn't as bad as they made it sound, but well, how do you backtrack now? What do you do? And they were just devastated. And the woman gets up to leave. It's her stop. She turns around and says, my son's not engaged to that girl, but I could have been the mother-in-law. Now, if these were serious things, that there was really problems, nobody's perfect. Obviously, nobody's perfect. Everybody has shortcomings. But when we say things, do we stop to think? Don't forget about how we color it. Chofetz Chaim brings an example where somebody tells somebody something, and he goes back, he goes to Reuven and said, you said this about me? He says, no, I didn't. And then he runs back to Shimon, and he brings Shimon over, and he says, you said that Reuven said this. And he says, yeah, you did. He goes, that's not what I said. I said it differently. I didn't say it the way you were saying it. He said, well, that's it. Then there's nothing to talk about. The damage that we do. It's taken out of context. People don't understand what they're saying. It's an amazing concept. The B'chanan Vossman says, how come HaKadosh Baruch Hu was allowed to tell Moshe Rabbeinu what Miriam and Aaron said about him? Isn't that Lashon Hara? So we know HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps the Torah. It's a Gemara in Shabbos, where they say, how could HaKadosh Baruch Hu make it rain? He's bringing it from one rishus to another, and he says to God, everything is one rishus. It's all one area, so there's no carrying, but he keeps the Torah. So says Rabbi Chanan Vossman, listen to this. He says, because you're allowed to speak Lashon Hara. As long as everything you say is true. But there's no way for me to say something over exactly the way it took place. You don't have the context. You don't understand how it was said. There's always going to be some coloring that goes into it. And this is the terrible situation where you destroy people's lives. With words. Now go collect all the feathers. Go collect all the things that you said, all the things that you did. So it used to be, guys used to sit in the back of shul, and they used to kvetch, and they used to complain, and they used to say things. Now, Baruch Hashem, we have the internet. We can destroy somebody in a second. People spread things, and they go all over the place. Shgarim. I'm not even talking about Shgarim. I had people say things to me, and he goes, I know 100% that this is true. I called up the person, it wasn't true. I know this for a fact. And people can say anything they want. And once we've heard it, our opinion is colored. There was a fellow I know, he was protexia. That's what they call it in Israel. In order to get certain things accomplished, you need what you call protexia. It sounds a lot better than corruption, but that's what the word really means. Yeah. In America, protexia, that's what they call it, corruption. I go socialize medicine. I make an appointment at the doctor, and first appointment I get is in a month. But it happens to be my mother is friendly with the secretary. I calls her up, and she pushes me ahead of everybody else the next day. That's against the law. Here we call it protexia. Anyway, so he used protexia, and this girl got into the high school. And then a couple of weeks later, the principal calls him up and says she has been unaccepted. So the parents are very upset. Call up the rabbi. The rabbi calls up the principal. He says, well, the parents are divorced. The girl has ADD. And I forgot what the third thing was. So he says, look, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know if ADD is a reason not to accept somebody, etc., but she doesn't have ADD. She doesn't. And the parents are happily married. And the third thing also wasn't true. And what did the principal say? There's no smoke without fire. It's a lie. The whole thing is a lie. Guy says to me once, I don't know how it came up, oh, your daughter made the teacher cry. Oh my gosh. So I go home and I was very upset at my daughter. And she says, it wasn't the teacher. It was the woman in the swimming chug. She didn't cry. She just got upset because I didn't want to go in the water because it was cold. This guy, he said the story to me. He might have said the story to other people. It was all shek. I called the guy up afterwards. He goes, oh, I must have the wrong information. They're shooting arrows. They go distance. We say things. We don't understand how we're affecting people. Yeah. Somebody who said something that was relatively innocuous, and the people on the internet went to destroy him. And this guy was a real tumim. He was unprepared for this. I've been killed 3 times already on the internet, so I got 4 lives left. I must be a cat. But, this guy was destroyed him. And I called him up to give him chizik. I said, listen, don't worry about it. You can only die once. People are going to say horrible things. What are you going to do? People make accusations, unsubstantiated. They have nothing to do. Somebody said something. I do believe him. I don't believe him. It's just outrageous. There's no proof. An accusation. Go prove the accusation. Destroy a person's life in the process. So, okay, I'm not talking about when there's really a crime has been committed and you're trying to protect society, but do you understand what the ramifications are? And I got to talk about it. There have been disagreements among Gedolei Torah, very serious disagreements in our generation. It wasn't as bad as the fight between Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz and Rabbi Yaakov Hemden, which apparently ripped Europe apart. It wasn't as bad as the fight between Hasidim and Misnagdim, where people were fighting in the streets, terrible things. But there were disagreements, and people asked me about it. And I said, from my misspent youth, I picked up a few lessons. And one of them is that when King Kong and Godzilla fight, stay out of the way. Now, if you don't know the reference, don't worry about it. It's not important. Somebody who goes to my Daf Yomi says, you have to know so much literature and pop culture and history, and science just to get through your references. In fact, Rabbi Gopin said to me, he goes, do you think most of your audience gets most of your references? I said, if they get 70%, I'm okay. He's not getting all of them because I'm old enough. Is that Baruch Hashem? So I remember there was an older fellow when I was in Los Angeles. I was much younger. And the two of us used to sing Al Jolson songs together. Now, there weren't too many kids in my age who are familiar with Al Jolson. But, what can I tell you? I was born in the wrong generation. What can I tell you? Somebody asked me once about Gilgulim, reincarnation. So I said, I'll tell you the truth. In my last life, I didn't believe in it. But now I'm really coming around to the idea. So I have an old soul. But we have to take upon ourselves now. We're in the end game now. This is the final chapter. And Mashiach is around the corner. And our enemy is Ishmael. His power is the power of speech. We have to battle him on our own terms. This is the fellow with the same powers that we have. It's now that we have to take our time to be mechazik ourselves in our speech. think 3 times before you say anything. And I have to tell you, as I look back on my life, the things I regret the most are not the times that I didn't say something. Although I do relive those moments and say, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that, this would have been a great line, I was like, but the things that I really regret are the times that I open my mouth. It's definitely the things that I say that I regret much more than the things that I don't say. So let us strengthen ourselves in this area and just be careful what we say, because the ramifications can be tremendous, and it's really hard to pick up those feathers after they've flown around. And if you're wrong, or you say it in a way that's colored in any way, the destruction that we create is tremendous. So that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can make a comment. You could find out about my upcoming event schedule. As I mentioned, I'm going to be in America the end of November. You can send me an email. And if you want to sponsor an episode, you go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast. Click on the Sponsor an Episode button. I'm David Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.